Total Sports Zone. All sports, all action, one zone.
Okay, whoa. The NBA trade season just exploded. We've got a massive deal to break down. The Atlanta Hawks have sent their franchise guy, Trae Young, to the Washington Wizards. And believe me, this isn't your average trade. This is a huge shakeup that's going to have major ripple effects for both of these teams.
All right, so let's get right into the nitty-gritty. What are the pieces here? Well, it's actually pretty simple. The Hawks are getting veteran guard C.J. McCollum and the sharpshooter Corey Kispert. And in return, the Wizards, they get the main event, the four-time All-Star Trae Young himself.
And I know what you're thinking, right? A four-time All-Star for a couple of role players? On paper, this looks like a total fleece. So who won this thing? To really answer that, we've got to go way beyond the surface and figure out what on earth each team is trying to do here.
Make no mistake, this is a genuine franchise-altering moment. For Atlanta, this is it. It's the end of an era that, not too long ago, looked incredibly bright. And for Washington, it's a hard pivot away from their old strategy. We're literally watching two teams come to a fork in the road and choose completely opposite directions. And you really have to remember how big a deal this is. I mean, it feels like just yesterday, it was only 5 years ago, that a 22-year-old Trae Young was putting the whole team on his back, leading them to the Eastern Conference Finals. He was the future. That's what makes this decision to just move on so absolutely stunning. Okay, so let's start with Atlanta. Why? Why would you trade your biggest star, the face of your franchise? Well, the answer isn't simple, and it's about a lot more than just putting the ball in the hoop. They're basically tearing up their old plans and starting with a totally new blueprint for the future.
And this right here, this is the whole Trae Young experience in a nutshell. It's two sides of the same coin. On offense, he's a wizard. The team scores a massive 9 points more per 100 possessions when he's out there. But then you flip it over, and you get the defense. Historically, the team gives up at least 2 more points on the other end when he's on the floor. That's the trade-off you live with.
And if you want to see what that actually looks like this season, just look at this chart. It's kind of crazy. When Trae is on the court, the other team is shooting an effective field goal percentage of 63%. But the second he sits down, it plummets to 54%. That's a night and day difference. It's huge. And look, this isn't just a recent slump or a new issue. As Kevin Pelton over at ESPN points out, this has pretty much been the story for his entire career. The Hawks have always defended better when he's on the bench. You know, you love the offensive firepower, but for Atlanta, that defensive price tag was just getting way too high to pay.
So what's the new game plan in Atlanta? Well, they're essentially trading a sure thing, a known star, for a chance at a more complete, more balanced future. First, they get a ton of financial flexibility. Suddenly, no one on the roster is making more than $31 million. That allows them to fully commit to building around their new all-star Jalen Johnson, shift the team's identity to defense, and cross their fingers that they can find their next superstar in the draft.
And a massive piece of that puzzle is this number right here, 15%. Because of a trade they made earlier, the Hawks now have about a 15% shot at landing the #1 pick in the 2026 draft. And that's the bet, right? They're gambling that finding a new guy at the top of the draft and building a solid team around him is a better recipe for success. Okay, so that's Atlanta's thinking. Now let's flip over to the other side of this deal. Why in the world would the Washington Wizards, a team that's been all about a slow and steady rebuild, suddenly decide to go all in for a star? This move basically throws their old timeline out the window.
So to understand why, you got to look at how their season has gone. I mean, they started out just horribly at 1-15. It was rough, but look at their record since then, 9-10. That's basically a 500 team. That little stretch of decent basketball might have been a signal to the front office, you know? A sign that, hey, maybe these young guys are ready for a bigger challenge. Maybe it's time to hit the gas.
And that's exactly what this trade is. A major course correction. They're done just hoarding draft picks and young prospects. Now it's about actually trying to win games by building around a guy who is a proven offensive superstar. You could say their rebuild just officially entered phase 2.
But, and this is a big but, here's the major risk for Washington. We all know Trae is an incredible offensive player, but he needs the ball in his hands, like all the time. So the question is, how does that fit with a team full of young guys who also need the ball to grow and develop? It's a real concern.
And just to put some numbers on that, check this out. Trae Young had the ball for 41% of Atlanta's offensive plays. 41%. Compare that to C.J. McCollum, who was at 29%. Heck, that's even higher than Fred VanVleet in Houston, and he was brought in to run the show.
So yeah, figuring out how he's going to share the rock with the other guys, that's a real puzzle they have to solve. So even with that risk, you can see the logic from Washington's side. It's a calculated gamble. Step 1, you got a 4-time All-Star for what is honestly a pretty good price. Step 2, they've got a ton of cap space, so they can easily take on his contract. So now step 3 is to just use the next few months to see how it works, see how he fits, and then in the offseason, you can build the rest of the team around that new core. All right, let's bring this all home. So who won the trade? What's the final verdict? Well, according to the breakdown from ESPN, this might be one of those rare trades where everybody kind of wins. It's a deal where both teams could actually come out ahead, even though they're running in totally opposite directions.
And the grades really back that up. Both teams, the Hawks and the Wizards, get a solid B for this one. And that grade really says it all, doesn't it? It shows just how balanced this deal was. At the end of the day, each team got what it wanted. Atlanta got a fresh start and financial freedom, and Washington got the star they needed to jumpstart their rebuild.
When you boil it all down, this whole trade is really a clash of two different ways of thinking about building a team in today's NBA. You've got the Hawks on one side, and their bet is that future flexibility and a shot at a top draft pick is worth more than a star who has some pretty obvious flaws. And then you've got the Wizards on the other side, betting that grabbing that flawed star is actually the fastest way to get good again.
And that really leaves us with a huge question, not just for these two teams, but for the whole league. In today's NBA, where landing a perfect top-tier superstar is almost impossible, is grabbing a flawed all-star a genius shortcut to contention? Or is it a trap that just puts a ceiling on how good you can ever really be? We'll have to wait and see whose bet pays off.